Ukraine strikes at the heart of Russia. The Oryol power plant is ablaze. Massive fires in Yaroslavl and Vladimir regions. An Oreshnik missile was destroyed in Kapustin Yar. A Russian artilleryman confessed to a war crime in which civilians were killed. Russian fuel exports have plummeted to a record low. Authorities are urgently seeking volunteers to guard oil terminals. The US and China are ready to jointly seek the path to ending the war in Ukraine. A Russian court punished a pensioner for wearing a Peace to Ukraine badge. Hello, my name is Anastasia Dmitrovskaya. Right now about the main thing, but first like this video and subscribe to our channel so that we don't get lost in the vastness of YouTube anymore. While the Kremlin is bombing civilian homes in Sumy with drones, Ukraine has responded with a powerful strike. In Russia, the Orlovsky thermal power plant and its authorities were hit again. It was an explosive night in the Vladimir region as well. One of the largest and most powerful substations was attacked there. It is a strategic hub of Russia's unified energy system, supplying electricity to the central region, including Moscow, Vladimir, and Kyiv regions. The region includes Moscow, Vladimir, Kyiv, Nizhny Novgorod, and parts of Ivanovo regions. There were also strikes in Yaroslavl. Locals report a drone attack on the oil refinery. The capacity of Slavneft Yanos is about 15 million tons of oil per year. According to the main intelligence directorate, the Kremlin is frantically trying to patch up holes in its air defense system to at least somehow protect industrial and energy facilities from our long-range strikes. As intelligence representative Andriy Yermak says, Russia is combining old Soviet models with what it calls the latest technology. According to him, air defense systems have been deployed in all major cities of the aggressor state as well as around strategically important sites. But the results, as they say, speak for themselves.
The key indicator is how many Ukrainian drones reach their targets and inflict damage. According to various estimates, the reduction in oil refining in Russia is between 18 and 20%. These are extremely large figures.
Ukraine continues to strike at the enemy's critical infrastructure deep within its territory, and it's doing so with increasing precision. What weapons make this possible, and why are the strikes intensifying? Find out right now in our report.
Distances of hundreds or even thousands of kilometers are no obstacle for Ukrainian weaponry. Russian oil refineries.
Well, that's pretty obvious, isn't it? The plants are completely fucked, without a doubt. That's clear even without saying it.
Key facilities of the military-industrial complex and the Russian war machine. No, even more.
Honestly, it's a nightmare. Damn, it's getting wild.
And recently, in response to ongoing shelling of Ukraine's civilian infrastructure, critical infrastructure in Russia has also come under the sights of the Ukrainian Armed Forces.
No way. Seriously, what the hell is going on here? No way. I mean, what the hell?
Bridge, look.
Where are we going? Now that's a ride. No way, what the hell?
When the Kremlin threatens Ukrainians with blackouts, Russians should also prepare for a cold and difficult winter.
If they threaten blackouts, for example, in the capital of Ukraine, the Kremlin should realize that a blackout will also come to the Russian capital.
For a long time, Western allies restricted Ukraine's ability to strike deep into Russian territory, as a result of which Ukraine has built up its own long-range arsenal. According to the head of Ukrainian intelligence, Kirill Budanov, as of today, 99% of strikes on Russian oil refineries are carried out with Ukrainian weapons.
At the
time when all this started, when people said we were fighting with one hand tied behind our back, I tend to agree with your view that this is the right interpretation of what was happening then. But now we have our own production, and it is precisely our domestic production that has given us the ability to use our own forces and resources, the way we see it. The Kremlin understands only the language of force. The best argument in any negotiations with Moscow is a powerful Ukrainian army and military-industrial complex. In particular, domestic production of long-range drones and missiles, with which Ukraine regularly strikes targets in Russia located thousands of kilometers or more from the front line.
In order to somehow bring this war to a stalemate, to shift it, we need to learn not only to repel attacks from the enemy on the front line, but also to suppress their logistics and their air force. That's why it became necessary, and I'm not even mentioning the need to strike at Russia's military-industrial enterprises and energy system. This is Belgorod, and basically there's no electricity anywhere in Belgorod.
If the simplest drones to manufacture are used for strikes on Russian oil refineries, jet-powered drones are better suited for targeting military-industrial facilities, like the Polyanity, Peklo and Bars types. Their technical specifications are not disclosed. Experts suggest that the range of these jet-powered drones is between 500 and 700 kilometers. The main advantage is their low cost compared to cruise missile competitors. Cities like Moscow and Leningrad, which are the most protected by the Russian Federation's air defense systems, could start getting hit every evening. The bar will be able to reach them, and I believe this should happen systematically. For dessert, Ukrainian long-range missiles are in store for the occupiers. The long-range Neptunes and Flamingos have ranges of 1,000 and 3,000 kilometers respectively. The Ukrainian Pink Bird not only boasts an enormous range, but also impresses with a warhead weighing about 1,000 kilograms.
Usually the warhead of a modern cruise missile is 450, but at most 500 kilograms. As a rule, almost all missiles have a 450 kilogram warhead. What does a 1-ton warhead provide? If such a missile hits a target, for example, an industrial facility, 2 of these missiles can completely disable it for at least a year. That is, there will be a single crater about 20 meters in diameter.
Russian terrorists who are shelling Ukrainian cities must realize that a mirrored strike is inevitable.
Reading the comments under previous episodes, I see that many of our viewers are from Kazakhstan, Moldova, Europe, and even the States. We Ukrainians are very grateful for your support and proud to have such a sensible audience. Let us know in the comments under this episode as well, which country are you watching us from, and does your country support our fight against the empire of evil? I always enjoy reading your comments, and for now let's keep going because the most interesting part is still ahead. Russian fuel exports have dropped to their lowest level since the start of the full-scale invasion. Bloomberg reports this, citing data from the Vortex platform.
According to data from Vortex and Altida, collected by Bloomberg, the total volume of seaborne petroleum product shipments for the first 26 days of this month averaged 1.8 million barrels per day, which is the lowest figure at least since the beginning of 2022.
Bloomberg writes that the drop in exports was especially influenced by attacks on the Ust-Luga oil and gas complex in the Leningrad region. This terminal accounts for more than 60% of Russia's oil exports.
The latest wave of restrictions targeting major oil companies Rosneft and Lukoil has added uncertainty, forcing traders to change payment routes and delivery schedules ahead of the upcoming sanctions deadline. The United States, November 21st.
Meanwhile, in the wake of the attacks, Russian authorities have begun seeking volunteers to help guard against and counter drones.
Reservists are being offered a 3-year contract to defend oil products from drone attacks, working on a 2 months on, 2 months off schedule. According to an announcement by the authorities of the Ropshinskoye rural settlement, the pay will range from 15,000 to 30,000 rubles per month.
As we can see, the so-called sanctions imposed by Ukrainian drones are proving much harder for the Kremlin to circumvent than those of the European Union. Russia used a 9M729 missile against Ukraine, which is capable of carrying a nuclear warhead. This was reported by Ukraine's Deputy Foreign Minister Andriy Yermak in a comment to Reuters journalists. In
recent months, Russia has attacked Ukraine with a cruise missile, the secret development of which prompted Donald Trump to withdraw from the nuclear arms control treaty with Moscow. This happened during his first term as President of the United States, the Ukrainian Foreign Minister stated. Andriy Yermak's comments became the first confirmation that Russia used the ground-launched 9M729 missile in combat operations in Ukraine or anywhere else.
It should be recalled that the United States and Russia withdrew from the Cold War-era Intermediate-Range Nuclear Forces Treaty in August 2019. At that time, Washington claimed that the 9M729 violated the agreement and had a range of over 500 kilometers, while Moscow, as usual, denied this. According to
Data from the Missile Slide website created at the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington, the range of the missile, which is capable of carrying either a nuclear or conventional warhead, is 2,500 kilometers. A military source reported that the 9 M729 missile launched by Russia on October 5th flew more than 1,200 kilometers and landed on Ukrainian territory.
Sibik also noted that launches of the 9 M729 against Ukraine began on August 21st, a few days after the meeting between Trump and Putin in Alaska. There were only 23 of them in total. There were also 2 launches of this missile in 2022. And continuing on the topic of Putin's nuclear scare tactics, the head of the security service of Ukraine, Vasyl Malyuk, reported that one of the 3 Oreshnik ballistic missiles was destroyed in Kapustin Yar by the SBU Gur unit. According to Malyuk, it was a successful mission and enough time has passed since then that it can now be discussed.
Until now, we had never disclosed this, but briefly we can say that one of the 3 Oreshnik missiles was successfully destroyed on their territory at Kapustin Yar by the forces of the HUR, SBU and SVR. It was a very successful operation and a lot of time has already passed since then.
Zelensky added that the Russians had 3 Oreshnik launches, of which 1 has already been used against them.
We believe that the Russians still have the capability to carry out up to 6 more launches. The Russians want to deploy the Oreshnik in Belarus, and we know that its estimated range is 5,000 kilometers, so Europeans need to pay attention to these risks.
And what do you think? Should the EU take the Kremlin's nuclear threats seriously? Or is this just about threats and nothing more? Now let's talk about the situation at the front. The defense forces are still managing to hold some positions on Russian territory. This was reported by the Kursk group.
The direction remains quite active despite a relative decrease in enemy assault actions. Although the enemy has not abandoned its plans to create the declared buffer zone, they are not giving up on it. For our part, we are disrupting these intentions. Some of our units continue to hold positions on the territory of the Russian Federation.
It should also be added that, according to deep state maps, a gray zone remains on Russian territory in the areas of Tetkino and Gueyevo. As for the situation in the Pokrovsk direction, it is currently the hottest section of the front.
The settlement is currently under our heavy fire control. The enemy is constantly trying to break through into this area, but every time they are repelled. They have not been able to gain a foothold here.
President Zelensky has also stated that the situation in this direction is difficult.
Our forces are controlling the situation near Pokrovsk. There, the situation with the enemy is tense from all sides. Do you remember the situation with the Kursk operation? Do you remember? In terms of information, how was it? There was a lot of different stuff. That we supposedly had 5,000 or 8,000 surrounded. What was a lie? There were no 5,000 to 8,000. No one was surrounded. All the commanders on the ground understand how encirclement could happen. It can't. People are more important, everyone understands that. But you should know that they are not dominating there today. There are a lot of them, but to say that they are winning is a lie.
As for the situation in Mirnograd, a soldier with the call sign Muknoy spoke about the tension on that section of the front. He claims that the situation is getting more complicated and leaving the city could be difficult. The enemy is trying to cut off escape routes.
There have even been attempts at our counterattacks near the captured territory of the 5-6 mine to push the enemy back. But there we fell into an ambush, and that has seriously affected the pace of the operation.
Meanwhile, Putin's statement about the near capture of Kupyansk was confirmed as disinformation by Viktor Trehubov, the head of the communications department of the Joint Forces Group.
At this moment, Putin's words are not based on anything at all. He doesn't even have anything to exaggerate. Of course, there is fighting going on in the city right now. The Russians are present in its northern outskirts and are trying to advance further south. But as for any Ukrainian units being surrounded from several sides or being blocked, there is no talk of that at all.
I never cease to admire the courage and heroism of Ukrainian soldiers. They are holding the front and standing up to a huge horde that vastly outnumbers them. Thank you. That's why I urge you to support the armed forces of Ukraine, and if you can't do so financially, write them words of encouragement in the comments. I know they're watching us.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
A Russian artilleryman recounted how his commander gave him the wrong coordinates and they ended up striking a village where there were civilians.
No, where I messed up, there isn't, because the drones were looking in a completely different direction. I'm telling you, we basically mixed up the targets, the Grad and Uragan ones. They were assigned to the same grid squares, and the idiot who was sitting there, basically as the duty officer, he just basically took them and mixed up the captain's ones. But what do I care? They just give me the numbers, damn it. I enter the numbers, sit down, turn the key, start it up, and whether I need to detonate or do it in the air, that's all I do, to set it on a timer. I did everything. So, I mean, there was no mistake on my part.
So, serviceman Vladimir Kostochko, an artilleryman, is serving in the 352nd Motorized Rifle Regiment in the Kharkiv direction. About how, on the commander's orders, he struck at civilians. Kostochko only found out after the LNR administration complained to the command. The Russian soldier says that at the time the incident was hushed up, and on television they reported that supposedly Ukrainian servicemen were in that village.
I arrived. I'm fucking walking in. And I need to call the battalion commander. So he says, how are you feeling? I'm fine. He says, there were 12 kids. He says, it's a mess. 9 women. What do you mean? Should I light up or something? Something like that.
Besides that, Kostochko says that once the command left them at their position for 2 months without ammunition and
food. We've been here for 2 months without food, without supplies, without shells, without bullets, without anything. We're just sitting here. They're all just sitting here. Take us in with you or something. We can't attack because we have nothing to fight with. And we can't leave because they won't let us cross the border. And this is called Regiment 352. I'm telling you, maybe you should just take it right now. Seriously, hurry the hell up. Don't wait any longer.
the soldier also complains that the organizations that are supposed to help participants of the special military operation, you'll never believe it, aren't actually helping them.
I'm saying I came back about a year and a half ago. Sometimes it's heating, sometimes it's something else. They promised that they would definitely help each and every one of you, without exception, and back and forth. For the first 6 months, they provided assistance. Oh, and then to hell with it all.
In short, classic Russian army. Let me take this opportunity to remind you that all Russian war criminals will be held accountable for the crimes they have committed and are still committing right now against Ukrainians. The defense forces destroyed the Russian flag that the occupiers had hung at the entrance to Pokrovsk. At the same time, our military notes that the statements about the encirclement of Kupyansk and Pokrovsk are Putin's fabrication. More details in our report.
Ukraine is once again under the occupiers' crosshairs. The Russians carried out a massive attack with missiles and drones. Tensions are also rising at the front. The most difficult situation remains in the Pokrovsk direction, where the intensity of fighting is very high. A large number of occupiers are concentrated there. The Russians are trying to gain a foothold by any means necessary.
The main tactic of Russian small assault groups is to attempt to create an operational encirclement of the Ukrainian defense forces directly in Pokrovsk itself. At the moment, the actual line of contact is the key defensive positions of the Ukrainian defense forces, the so-called CTD. Despite the extremely difficult situation, the Ukrainian defense forces are carrying out successful counteroffensive actions. And at the moment, the area under the control of the Ukrainian defense forces has increased to 200 square kilometers.
Fierce fighting continues in the Kupyansk area of the Kharkiv region. The occupiers are trying to gain a foothold in the northern part of the city. However, there is no question of any encirclement of Ukrainian troops. The situation in Minorad and its surroundings is also fully controlled by the Ukrainian Armed Forces.
At the moment, the main efforts of the occupiers are not aimed at blocking the Ukrainian defense forces directly in Kupyansk, but rather at the possibility of breaking through to the Kupyansk railway junction. The occupiers need control over this key railway station. In order to use the short logistics route from the territory of the Russian Federation and the occupied areas of Luhansk region to form a strike group, whose goal will be to advance along the Oskil River towards the Sloviansk-Kramatorsk agglomeration.
Meanwhile, Putin has come out with a new scare tactic. The bunker dweller continues to talk about the successful tests of Russia's so-called wonder weapon.
These are underwater unmanned underwater devices called Poseidon as well. equipped with an advanced nuclear power unit, this system achieved a significant milestone. For the very first time, we managed not only to successfully launch it from the underwater carrier using the starting engine, but also to activate the nuclear power unit itself. This accomplishment marks a notable step forward in our technological progress.
But Putin did not provide any evidence. No details about the tests, location, route, duration, or any other specifics were disclosed.
Neither Poseidon nor, accordingly, Oreshnik have been put into serial production or placed on combat duty. Therefore, there is absolutely no reason to talk about any threat from these so-called mythological Russian Wunderwaffe to NATO or directly to the United States.
But despite this, the ALCO president Medvedev called Poseidon a doomsday weapon and at the same time threatened Belgium with a nuclear strike. Let us recall that the Belgian Minister of Defense stated that if Russia strikes the country's capital, NATO members will level Moscow to the ground.
These are nothing more than information stunts, mere attempts at manipulation that Western allies have over time completely stopped reacting to. And the reaction, or rather the lack of any significant response, is actually quite telling and revealing in itself. The reaction of the Russian Federation's ambassador to Belgium to the statement by that country's defense minister demonstrates complete confusion and unpreparedness for such a tough statement from a NATO member.
Against the backdrop of the Kremlin dictator's loud statements, Donald Trump moved to action. The American president instructed the Pentagon to resume nuclear weapons testing.
On the nuclear weapons tests of the United States, that's tough. And this is both the military response of the country and President Trump to such information attacks from the Russian Federation. Moreover, Trump stated very firmly that the United States possesses the world's leading nuclear capability. Russia is in second place and China is conditionally third.
At the same time, the US has begun a large-scale reduction of its military presence in Eastern Europe. On the
one hand, while announcing such plans during the rotation period, I want to emphasize once again that the United States is strengthening its nuclear presence in European countries. Let me emphasize again, this is the redeployment of the nuclear arsenal to the United Kingdom and the redeployment of nuclear submarines. And this is the presence of an American aircraft carrier in Denmark's territorial waters. In other words, all of this indicates, on the contrary, a strengthening of the US military presence directly near the borders of the Russian Federation.
Russian strikes on Ukraine have damaged substations that are critical for nuclear safety. This was reported by the IAEA, citing the agency's teams at several Ukrainian nuclear power plants.
Agency teams at the South Ukraine and Khmelnytsky nuclear power plants reported that each of the plants lost access to one of their external power lines, and the Rivne nuclear power plant reduced the output of 2 out of 4 units at the request of the grid operator.
In addition, IAEA Director General Rafael Grossi stated that the threat to nuclear safety is real and ongoing. Just like, in fact, the real and constant shelling of Ukraine's energy system by Russia. And something tells me that the deep concern of the so-called IAEA won't make the Kremlin stop these attacks. Give this video a like if you agree. The negotiation process between Russia and Ukraine should begin with a ceasefire along the current line of contact. This was stated by the head of the Office of the President of Ukraine, Andriy Yermak. He also noted that there will be a single document at the negotiating table, and that there is no competition or alternative peace plans for Ukraine. And this document, Yermak says, is being prepared by Ukraine, the European Union and the United States. Meanwhile, Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Mikhail Galuzin stated, and I quote, that there are currently all the conditions for the development of the Istanbul track. But Moscow is ready to continue direct negotiations. The problem, Galuzin says, is only the lack of political will from Kyiv. At the same time, the Financial Times reports that the United States canceled the meeting between Trump and Putin due to Moscow's unacceptable demands regarding peace in Ukraine. Journalists note that the Russian Foreign Ministry demanded territorial concessions from Kyiv, a reduction of the armed forces of Ukraine, as well as guarantees that the country would not join NATO. In fact, after hearing these conditions from Moscow, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio spoke by phone with Russian Minister Lavrov and later informed Trump that Russia was not showing readiness for negotiations. But the problem lies solely in the lack of political will from Kyiv and not at all in the idea that Moscow is unwilling to negotiate and is set on waging war. So please, gentlemen, let's not get anything mixed up here. Sanctions have already targeted 610 tankers from Russia's shadow fleet, but it is necessary to further restrict another 340 vessels, 65 of which are key to supporting the aggressors. Meanwhile, the Financial Times reports that despite US sanctions, countries are circumventing these restrictions and purchasing sanctioned oil from international waters.
Satellite images have shown that the Indian tanker Sabotage has repeatedly taken oil directly from Russian shadow vessels in international waters and then delivered it to India. Subsequently, India sold this oil to other countries. Such operations make it possible to conceal the origin of the cargo and effectively bypass international sanctions.
As we can see, so far the only sanctions that Russia cannot circumvent are the sanctions imposed by Ukrainian drones, which strike Russian oil refineries. US President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping held a bilateral meeting in the South Korean city of Busan, the first since the start of Trump's second term. In his initial comments after the meeting, the American president said that it went amazingly.
Donald Trump met with Xi Jinping in South Korea as part of his tour of the Indo-Pacific region. The main topics of the meeting were trade barriers between the countries and, of course, the Russia-Ukraine war.
They agreed to develop a more forward-looking joint agenda for political dialogue, which in principle is a very positive outcome of this meeting. In
the result of the meeting, the parties agreed to reduce the tariff from 20% to 10%. This tariff concerns Chinese goods related to fentanyl, a synthetic opioid analgesic. The overall level of US tariffs will reach up to 47%.
The fundamental issues underlying the conflict between the US and China have not gone anywhere. And these are very important questions, such as the fate of the island of Taiwan and the possibility of imposing tariffs on Chinese goods, specifically because of the purchase of Russian oil. Trump said that these issues were not raised diplomatically. But in such cases, when you don't reach an agreement, you just say that you didn't talk about it.
The agreements regarding Ukraine were less productive, despite the fact that, according to the US president, Ukraine was discussed at length. Initially, Trump wanted to persuade Xi to reduce support for Russia so that Putin would agree to end the war. It was not announced whether the parties reached an agreement in this regard.
A strategic dialogue of cooperation has been established between authoritarian Russia and authoritarian Beijing. And to risk that, Xi, in return, would have to receive something considerably more substantial and significant, something that would match the high level of relations that currently exist between America and Beijing, since for now, the relationship more closely resembles the logic of de-escalatory actions in the trade and economic sphere. I would not say that at this particular moment in time between Washington and Beijing, a strategic alliance or dialogue has been established.
Donald Trump rated the meeting a 12 out of 10. By the way, this was the first meeting between the leaders of the US and China in the past 6 years.
Based on the statement, we see that there won't be any tariffs on Chinese goods and there will be access for American agricultural products. It seems like a good statement, but how true that really is, again, remembering President Trump's experience at least, Trump's statement that peace in the Middle East has been achieved after 3,000 years. You know, I'm someone who reads news from the Middle East, and what's happening there doesn't even come close to reminding me of peace being achieved in that region. So Trump's statement that everything has been agreed with China and everything is wonderful, let's at least wait 48 hours and then see what happens.
Trump said that he had agreed with Xi Jinping on a visit to China in the spring of next year. After that, the Chinese leader will make a return visit to the United States. In
St. Petersburg, a pensioner was fined for wearing a blue and yellow Peace to Ukraine badge. Vyborgsky district? Yes, Vyborgsky district, which is located in St. Petersburg. It is known that 78-year-old Mikhail Pushnitsky was detained at the Levashovskoye cemetery, where a flower-laying ceremony was taking place, for the Day of Remembrance of Victims of Political Repression. The pensioner, just listen to this, was found guilty of discrediting the army and fined 30,000 rubles. How are you feeling, honestly? I feel patient, well, at the moment. Are you sure everything's all right, actually? Everything is fine?
Thank you very much. Wishing you all the best in everything.
Pushnitsky refused a lawyer as he believed it wouldn't have helped them anyway. In addition, the pensioner refused to remove his badge, saying that everyone has the right to express their opinion in a non-violent way. And this really should be acknowledged as true, but in Russia, as they say, it doesn't work that way. In Novosibirsk, a veteran of the special military operation who became a children's coach systematically beat his trainees. According to the investigation, from November 2023 to March 2024, during sports and patriotic activities, Shargan systematically beat underage trainees at his center with wooden sticks, his hand, and also with an unidentified object on the head. The abuse came to light after one of the children returned from military training with bruises and a head injury. The boy said that the coach beat him with a stick for not following orders. Shargan himself claimed that the teenager ran into a log and could have fallen during exercises. RBC reports that the Berdsk City Court found Daniel Shargan, the head of the military sports center Alpha, who beat children, guilty under the article on the torture of minors and sentenced him to 3 years in a general regime penal colony. Well, and with the penal colony, as you can imagine, it's back to the front, and somewhere along this chain, a ticket to a Kobzon concert should appear. What do you think of our news? Let us know what we should change to become better. We will definitely take it into account. In the meantime, please like this video to support what we do, and be sure to subscribe to our channel, Ukraine Today, so you don't miss our upcoming episodes. See you soon!